Welcome to another ALP Valuation Services Lunch and Learn video. Today we're going to be talking about trade fixtures when doing an appraisal. So, what are trade fixtures? Well, it's items of property that are used by a business in order to do work. And often this is attached to the real estate, but it doesn't meet the definition of leasehold improvement. So I'm going to show you a couple of example photographs here. So, here's a walk-in cooler in a restaurant. Here's a vent hood that is installed over some cooking appliances in a restaurant kitchen. And here's a compressor from an industrial location. And so these are things that are tied in, attached to the walls, the ceiling, built onto the floor, etc., of the real estate that is leased. But it is quite definitely the property of the business, used by the business. And so we include these in our evaluation reports. I'm going to give you some examples of the difference between trade fixtures and leaseholds. So a trade fixture might be something like a barber chair, a bar counter, a compressor, as I showed you, electrical components to serve tenant machinery. So if there's a big piece of equipment, a CNC machine, for example, and it has its own electrical transformer that's been brought in to serve that machine, then this is also part of the trade fixtures that we can evaluate. We've also got built-in restaurant seating, installed decor items. Sometimes you can get quite elaborate items of decor that are installed in restaurants, for example. Walk-in freezer, as I showed you. Over on the leasehold side, we've got different types of things, and this is really to highlight the difference between leaseholds and trade fixtures. But you've got things like paint, you've got wall coverings, flooring that goes down the floor, carpet, etc., bathrooms, the new fixtures that might have to be put in if a certain business moves into an empty location, they might have to build a second bathroom or maybe renovate a bathroom to make it wheelchair accessible, for example. And these would fall into the leasehold category. So the leaseholds, though, still also hold value for tenant businesses. And under the CSBFA Finance Act, they can be borrowed against as well. And so we do evaluate leasehold improvements too. But here's the big difference. In most commercial leases, if there's any kind of default or at the end of the lease, leasehold improvements almost always end up becoming the property of the landlord. And so the evaluation of leasehold improvements is pretty straightforward. It's what are the costs divided by the life of the lease that is available to the tenant, with the understanding that it will remain in good standing the whole time, versus trade fixtures, which are often removed by a tenant at the end of a lease if they're going to carry on their business in another location. And now, like, what sort of considerations go into the value of these things? Well, I've got this table that I'd like to show you because the status of the business plays a huge role in what kind of value is going to be given to these different pieces of equipment. And you can see here on the left-hand side under value definition, they go down in order from highest value down to lowest. So we've got fair market value in continued use, fair market value removed, orderly liquidation value, forced liquidation value, and liquidation value in place. And you'll notice there on the left, the bottom two indicate that there's a limited time horizon, which often is what creates an urgency or compulsion on the part of whoever is trying to sell equipment to get it sold as quickly as possible. On in the center there, we're talking about movable equipment, so things like refrigerators, pieces of equipment that have wheels on them, etc. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is on the right-hand column. So these would be the trade fixtures or installed equipment that we're talking about here in this video. So you can see that if we have a business that is open and operating under the assumption it is profitable. So if you think about the restaurant, I showed you the examples of the walk-in cooler, the vent hood over the cooking equipment. I mentioned, elaborate decor items in the dining room, for example. All of these things are going to hold full value depending on the definition of value if the business is open. If the business is closed, that is going to affect tremendously the type of value that's going to be given. So, whereas a refrigerator, for example, if the business is closed, it might be sold at an orderly liquidation value. This would represent a sort of wholesale value for that used refrigerator. The built-in walk-in cooler is going to have a scrap equivalent at that same level of trade, because what has to go into selling that walk-in cooler, it's got to be disassembled and removed from the location. And so not only do we consider what the refrigerator might normally be worth, we discount it because of the time urgency, the fact that it needs to be sold right away. And then we have to further subtract the costs of having tradespeople come in and disconnect everything and disassemble everything and remove it and transport it to another place where it's going to be used. And so you can see quite clearly that if the business were to close, the value of these trade fixtures and would be severely impacted. The value of leaseholds would evaporate because, as I said earlier, in most leases, if the tenant goes into default and the business closes, then a lot of that stuff just simply becomes the property of the landlord. And so I hope you enjoyed this little dive into the world of trade fixtures, because they are things that we appraise, and leaseholds as well, and they do significantly hold value for functioning, profitable businesses that are carrying on trade on a day-to-day basis as a going concern. But they can be severely impacted. So when we're by business closures. So when we're asked by a lender, for example, to provide more than one definition of value, for example, fair market and orderly liquidation, then you really see this. You really see the difference in some of these things, where the price will drop off precipitously for some of the trade fixtures, depending on the complexity of moving them. Something like an installed examination light, for example, in a veterinary clinic, yeah, it might simply just be bolted to the wall. It might be quite straightforward to remove it. Something like the walk-in freezer, a whole different story. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to head over to our website and join our email list. You'll receive a free copy of our special report, The Essentials of Machinery and Equipment Appraisal. It dives deeply into our reports, the definitions of value, why and how you might need one of these reports. If you are an entrepreneur or a business owner, you're certainly going to get some value out of reading this. And if you work with business people, you're going to become a better advisor or deal maker for having read this. When you sign up for our email list, you will also get a monthly email that will invite you to new Lunch and Learn videos like this one. And head over to our website to see our frequently asked question library. There's all kinds of example videos there that show you what our reports look like and talk more about some of these different questions that people are always asking. And you can find that over at BusinessAndAssetValues.com. We look forward to meeting with you and learning about your questions. And please feel free to call, email us. We're more than happy to take some time and talk with you to learn how we can help you or your clients. Thanks.